I found out my roommate was secretly charging me rent for a place he didn't even own. I still don't fully understand how I let it go on for so long. Looking back, there were signs, small things at first, things I brushed off because I didn't want conflict, and honestly, because I was just grateful to have a place to stay. But in the end, I wasn't just paying rent. I was being scammed in the most humiliating way possible. And the worst part? It wasn't a stranger who did it. It was someone I called my friend. Let me explain. I moved to the city 2 years ago for work. Fresh start, new job, new life. I didn't know anyone, and housing prices were insane. That's when I met Mark. We worked at the same company. He was outgoing, funny, the kind of guy who always seemed to know someone everywhere. When I mentioned I was struggling to find a place, he immediately said, "Hey, I've got a spare room, cheap rent. You can move in next week if you want." It felt like luck, too good to be true, but I ignored that feeling. The apartment was decent, not fancy but clean. 2 bedrooms, small kitchen, old building but in a good location. The landlord, according to Mark, was some guy named his uncle who lived overseas. I never met him. I paid Mark directly every month in cash or bank transfer. He always had a reason for cash. Uncle doesn't use apps. Account is frozen. Just send it to me, I'll forward it. I didn't question it. Why would I? He lived there too. He had keys. He paid his share too. At least, that's what I thought. For the first 6 months, everything was fine. We'd hang out, order food, watch shows. He was a little messy, but nothing crazy. Then, slowly, things started shifting. First, it was small delays. "Hey bro, can you send rent a bit early this month?" Uncle's asking. Then, "I covered your share this time, you owe me." Then weird comments like, "You're lucky I'm not charging you more. Market rate is way higher." That one stuck with me, but I laughed it off, because I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. The first real crack came when I met the actual landlord. It wasn't planned. I had locked myself out one afternoon and asked the building manager for help. He had a spare key and let me in. While we were waiting, I mentioned Mark and the uncle overseas. The manager just stared at me. Then he said something I'll never forget. "That unit is under Mark's cousin's name, and the rent is fully paid through direct bank transfer." I laughed at first. I thought he misunderstood, so I said, "No, I pay rent to Mark every month." The manager frowned. "What?" "No, the owner receives it directly, always has." My stomach dropped. I remember feeling hot all over, like my body couldn't decide whether to panic or deny it. I told him he must be mistaken, but he wasn't. He even showed me records, payments, dates, everything. And my name wasn't anywhere. I didn't confront Mark immediately. I went home and just sat on my bed for hours, trying to make it make sense. Maybe the manager was wrong. Maybe there were 2 accounts. Maybe Mark was subletting legally. I kept inventing explanations because the truth was too stupid to accept. That I had been paying rent to my roommate for no reason. That night, I tested him. I casually asked, "Hey, when do you usually send the rent to your uncle?" Without even looking up from his phone, he said, "Already did. Don't worry about it." That was the moment everything clicked. He didn't even hesitate. He didn't think. It was automatic, like he had rehearsed it. And suddenly, I realized something worse than being lied to. I wasn't the first. Over the next week, I started paying attention, really paying attention. And I saw it. Different stories for different days. Sometimes I was late. Sometimes he covered me. Sometimes he mentioned other tenants, even though it was a 2-bedroom apartment. That last one broke me, because I realized I didn't even know how long this had been going on. Maybe before I moved in. Maybe I was just the latest version of this arrangement. So I started digging, quietly. I checked property records. I looked up the building ownership. I asked around neighbors. And eventually, I found the truth. The apartment belonged to a small property company. Rent was fixed, and it was nowhere near what I was paying. Not even close. I was paying almost double. All to Mark. The moment I confirmed it, I felt something switch inside me. Not anger at first, something colder. Clarity. Because suddenly, I understood the structure of everything. He wasn't improvising, he was running a system, and I was just one of the parts. I didn't explode right away. I waited. I smiled. I acted normal. And I started quietly collecting everything. Screenshots of transfers, messages, rent receipts, even audio recordings of him talking about uncle and payments. He had no idea. Because people like that never think the quiet ones are dangerous. Then came the night I confronted him. I remember it clearly. We were in the kitchen. He was cooking instant noodles like nothing was wrong. I said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about rent." He didn't even turn around. "Yeah? What about it?" And I said, "I spoke to the landlord." That got his attention. He paused for half a second, just half. Then he laughed. "Which landlord?" That laugh told me everything. I showed him the bank records. He stopped smiling. Then I showed him the messages. His face changed again. Then I told him I had already confirmed ownership. And for the first time since I met him, Mark had nothing to say. No joke, no excuse, no quick lie, just silence. Then he tried. Of course he tried. He said it was a misunderstanding, that he was handling payments for convenience, that I would have struggled dealing with the landlord directly, that he was doing me a favor. A favor. Charging me extra money for a favor. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because I realized something important. He actually believed his own excuses. I told him I was moving out, that I wanted every cent back, and that I had already spoken to the landlord. That last part was a bluff, but it worked. His face went pale, because suddenly it wasn't just me. It was exposure. The next few days were chaos. He tried calling me, texting me, switching between apology and anger. "You're overreacting. You're ruining our friendship. You don't understand how things work." But I was already done. I had already packed, already found a new place, already stopped replying. 2 weeks later, I heard from someone else in the company. Turns out I wasn't the only one. There had been others, different roommates over the years. Same story, same pattern, same uncle overseas. And suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't a mistake. It was a routine, a cycle. And I had just been the latest entry. I never got all my money back. I don't think I ever will. But I got something else instead. Clarity. And a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes the people closest to you aren't your friends. They're just the ones who figured out how to charge you for trust. I don't know what happened to Mark after I left. I didn't stay to find out. But I do know this. The next time someone offers me something that feels too convenient, I don't ignore the feeling anymore. I listen to it. Because that quiet instinct, that's usually the first warning you get before everything falls apart.